Hello, America. Welcome to another episode of your favorite A24 production-centric podcast. A24 in a can. Oh, wait, no, that's just me, because I usually forget whether or not we're supposed to buy liquor or not. Oops. No. This is A24 on the Rocks. I am your host for this episode, Blaze Fitzgerald, Brian the First. And right now, dear viewer and illustrious panel before me, I have just one simple question for you. Do you want to live deliciously? That's right, tonight we are reviewing and analyzing 2015's film, The Witch. But before we delve any further, I believe introductions are in order. My name once again is Blaze Ryan. Tonight I am drinking the Black Phillip. I will have another one of our distinguished panel members explain that. But next up for introduction, we have the wisest man in Wisconsin, the Magi of Milwaukee, the cleric of cinematography, the comparable Mr. Konishek. Please introduce yourself, sir.
Wow, I don't think I can introduce myself at all after that. That was brilliant. Hello world, my name is Kevin K-Con Konachek, and I have chosen to live deliciously tonight. I am drinking one of the most fine-tasting bourbons in my collection. It's not even a bourbon, it's actually a rye whiskey. It's called Seagrass by Barrel, and it's rye whiskey finished in Martinique rum, Madeira, and apricot brandy barrels. And at 119.3 proof, it kind of tastes like jet fuel, but delicious jet fuel.
Kick his ass,
so I got that going for me. Yeah. All right, and up next we have...
my name's Eric, and I'm also drinking that Black Phillip Martini, and it has blue curacao, blackberry liqueur, and vodka. I got Absolute vodka, and a touch of lemon zest in a martini glass, and it's pretty nice. Up next, we have Kelly.
Hey, this is Kelly. I'm also drinking that Black Phillip Martini, and we got that recipe from the Martini Shot, who he reviews a lot of A24 movies as well. So his cocktails are delicious, and we've enjoyed every single one we've made so far.
And then Cole had to take a spiritual journey in the Mojave Desert tonight, so hopefully, he doesn't run into any homeless people, but I guess we'll have to see. Good luck, Cole. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yep, good luck, buddy.
So, just a quick elevator pitch of the plot. The film takes place in the early American settlement times of the northeastern United States and circles around a household of English pilgrims who have been banished from their colony due to religious differences. After leaving the tribunal, William, played by Ralph Ineson, and Catherine, played by Kate Dickie, move their kids and construct themselves a farm on an isolated piece of property near the edge of the woods. They're completely isolated from the neighbors and the life that they once knew. Soon enough, Catherine has her own new baby named Samuel, and all seems to be going well for the growing family, until Samuel disappears, is kidnapped, and possibly slain. It's a terrible catastrophe, but it's particularly awful for the eldest of the children, Thomason, played by the lovely Anya Taylor-Joy. She was the last one to be with Samuel, which leads to her self-blame over his vanishing, and well as her mother accusing her for the terrible crimes. So, I know how we usually start. We usually do a vibe check of the opening scene, but I think considering since Mr. Eggers, besides being writer and director of this film, he's also an accomplished and well-regarded set production and costume designer. And he did an astonishing 5 years of extensive research on 1600s New England when making this movie. So I would like everyone to please provide their opinion on the setting and cinematography. Did this period place put you in the period? Kevin, let's start with you.
Absolutely. You could see right off the bat from the very first scene that the dedication to costume design and period-timed placement was going to be absolutely critical for the rest of this film. Upon viewing it, while you're watching it, you absolutely get that impression that our director and our writer really took his time on doing the research, right? as far as the language is concerned. The script is something directly out of the 1600s. It's very, very authentic, historical. They put a lot of attention to detail when it comes to all of those things. Even something as simple as our costume designs, just making sure that it was really authentic to the time, using the correct materials, especially even like something as like building our sets, like the thatch work and things are very authentic to what you would see in a New England colonial house. And I just think that you start out the film with all those attention to details, and it really puts you in that place and allows you to kind of fall into the film for the rest of it. So for my point, it definitely put me right in the mode and was right involved right off the beginning.
Wonderful. Kelly, as our feature designer, what did you feel about the set production, the costume production, all the rest?
Yeah, I mean, the attention to detail is something that I hope is appreciated as much as the thought that went into it. And by that I mean even one of the first scenes that they have kind of this council that's kicking out the family that we're going to follow for the rest of the story. And they're powdered wigged, they're a little bit make-upped, and I'm looking at these men, I'm like, they take themselves very seriously. And this is like high society, how they look at the time. And it feels so, gives authenticity immediately too, because it's not like over the top, but it's not hiding away from how ridiculous the kind of stylings were at the time. And then they take the time throughout the movie with the costuming to even show it off in ways like untying just those little tiny pieces of threads that would keep a shirt together. They show the shift dress underneath the corsets. They show the loosening of how those corsets would have been made at the time. It's something that I greatly appreciate, and I'm glad that they give it as much time as they do, because it took a lot of thought. You said 5 years. I didn't even know that, but it makes sense, and I'm glad that that's the first thing that we're talking about with this movie, because it's necessary to really set the scene and the story in the really authentic way that they do.
Absolutely. Eric, Mr. Cinematography, what did you feel that Mr. Eggers did it justice, showing this old New England vibe?
Totally. I mean, this was his first full-length film, and I think when you said, like, he was working on it for 5 years, he, like, developed the script a long time ago, and as is often with first-time filmmakers, it took a while to get picked up. So I'm sure he wrote other scripts in the meanwhile. He's from Lee, New Hampshire, and apparently in his childhood he had a big obsession with witches and went to the Plymouth plantation a lot when he was a kid. And you could tell that all of this is a great inspiration for this film. This is his first film, and as we see in The Northman and The Lighthouse, he does meticulous research for every single one of his films, and you can tell in this dialogue he really knows old New England dialogue. Literally at the end of the film, it says the film's dialogue comes from journals, diaries, and court records. So it's like he literally lifted this off of journals, diaries, and court records, and he really wanted to create an authentic experience for the viewer like it was never before seen or heard, and I think he did that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And then if you look at his other work, The Lighthouse, The Northman, I mean, you can see that he puts that attention to detail into every film that he
That's his thing.
does.
Yep.
And it's something that I think a lot of the general movie-going public probably doesn't appreciate as much as they probably should, and I'm glad that all three of you do. Kevin, did you want to add?
Yeah, there was some interesting interviews that came out after this film where Robert Eggers basically said that he wanted the viewer to be put as a fly in the wall on what it would be like to be a Puritan in the 1600s. There was even so much to the point when he was trying to sell this movie earlier that he wanted it to be zero accompaniment scored. He wanted it to be just dialogue. He wanted it to be really, truly just what you were seeing as if you were actually part of that. Later, he realized that to get picked up that he had to kind of make it more of a genre film and kind of fill those roles. But his true intent really was from a historical aspect. And all those primary sources that Eric referenced are the reason that this movie is actually so brilliant, is because it kind of toes the line of what's believable and what's not believable in a sense of the supernatural and realistic. And it's just because of the preparation that Robert Eggers put into this film. So well done.
One correction, Plymouth Plantation, not Plymouth. I got messed up. I read Plimoth, which is much different from the Plymouth, Michigan, which I live nearby. So,
and just for a point of clarification, these guys weren't actually the Pilgrims either. They were a group that came 10 years after the original Pilgrims, and they were kind of a separation too. So the Pilgrims were part of the separationist group of the Church of England, where the Puritans that we're watching in this film are more of just they wanted to kind of reform the church. They weren't really trying to break away from it. So just a small historical point.
Listen, as long as I get my Quaker Oats, I don't really care. The movie is generally panned by the large movie-going audience because it goes basically at a snail pace. It's a slow burn. I think we can all agree. What are your thoughts on Mr. Egger's commentary to make the pacing of a horror film like this compared to contemporary horror films of its time, such as The Nun? Do you guys think that the pacing was fine? Would you wish it would have had more action? Kevin, since you're the first newbie, what did you feel with the pacing?
Okay. I feel like this question's a little complicated in the sense that I don't want the pacing to be a reason that I'm bashing this film for any stretch of the imagination. I think that the pacing is very critical in what this movie gives you. Within the first 10 minutes of our film, spoiler alert for everybody who's now not still here with us, we have we'll call it a baby grinder session, where we basically have a taking of an infant, and we have a violent scene resulting in the death and the baby shampoo, or whatever you want to call it, that comes in relation to it. And we get that within the first 10 minutes of the film, okay? So that pacing-wise, there's not a lot more you're going to come from as far as, like, you hit that right off the bat, and now you need to kind of slow it down and allow the audience to digest what the hell you just saw. Did I find it going a little bit slow in the middle of it with some of the long dialogue? Absolutely. But I think that was also just because of kind of what you were put to as a viewer. The Old English is hard to pay attention to. It's like Shakespeare. You really have to be in the mode to kind of take that all in. And if you're not ready for it or not expecting it, it kind of can lag a little bit. I fully expect on my second watching of this film to not have any of that, to really be anticipatory on what's happening next and not feel that lag in the pace. But overall, I thought that it hit the high moments when it needed to. It picked up some of the slower parts with some interesting dialogue pieces, and it didn't drag so much for me to really come away from it being like, what the hell did I just watch, like some viewers did.
Eric, same question. What did you think the pacing was on point, or would you wish it would have sped up a little bit, get to the point?
It was perfect for me. I love slow burns. I love films that slowly build up to a crescendo, and this did everything I wanted it to, and it's a mark of Robert Eggers' films, and it's why I love him as a director. I do want to touch on that baby mashing scene. The theme in that baby mashing scene, it made it sound like she was actually like tapping the masher onto the baby as it was happening, and this is what pro-lifers think liberals do in their spare time. The baby blood lotion and everything. It's insane.
He's not wrong.
All right, so Kelly, I think you're more the middle ground, perhaps. So what's your thoughts? How do you mash your babies? No, I'm kidding. What's the pace?
So, I think the pacing is quite good. I don't think if it went any faster that it would be as much of... I'm just going to go ahead and say this movie's a piece of art, and it wouldn't be if it was paced any differently, if it was like... if the drops of like actual things that are going to scare you were placed any differently. Like, I feel like this movie is art for art's sake. It's not made like The Nun, if we're using that as an example, where that's like a crowd pleaser. That's like a event you go out to with your friends as like a Friday night. But The Witch is a different thing, and I think that because of the way that it was all crafted together, it has more of an impact. Like, I feel smarter walking away from this movie, too. And I also think if it was paced any faster, with easing yourself into the dialect, if it was any quicker, it would be harder to get into that world. And that's a huge part of it, too. It's a really immersive kind of experience. And I don't even necessarily agree with it being a slow burn, even though this movie's always called that, because it builds, but it has places that is, like, horror impact over and over and over again. And though the end does come with I guess, the swell. I don't think it's necessarily like the burn that it's described as. I feel like it's like a fireplace with cracking logs.
I like that.
I love that description.
I think you're actually right, though, not to cut in there, because we see little examples throughout this entire film. We talk about it, right, having that, we get that big, huge moment within the first 10 minutes, and then every little thing that happens to that family is another log on that fire, another ratchet on the tension, another thing that brings us to a climax. And while there are elements of a slow burn, I agree. I don't think it's like that, holy, we'll call it Jesus moment in this particular film. And I think that it's well done because of it.
You look at the classic story arc, I think that's something anybody who studies story, you kind of get the come up on the story arc and then you get a come down at the end. This thing is just a straight line straight up to a crescendo, up to the peak of the roller coaster, and then you get stuck at the top of the roller coaster.
Right, and you never go down the other side. It's like someone described it as like a ratchet where you just kept going on the tension level, and instead of it breaking or releasing the tension, it's just the whole freaking movie is just straight up just tension,
it's like
anxiety.
If you were on a roller coaster, you kept going up, and you were like, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, and you just keep going up and up.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great way to describe it.
You guys are all great descriptors on what this film is. I would compare it to a brisket. Where you got to put it in the oven, you got to love it. You can taste the ending, and it just doesn't come, and then finally it just melts off the bone, and you're just like, this is what I came to the movies for.
Now, I can also see a bunch of people being, pissed off leaving this movie, right? Just being like, oh, what did I just watch? I thought that was garbage. Expecting something completely different.
Like I said, when I say, general, movie audience, when you look at the Rolling Stones, Roger Ebert, a lot of them panned it for being too slow and, too dialogue heavy.
You look at the Rotten Tomatoes, right? 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think the user score is extraordinarily different than the critic
and
score
that's,
on this film.
like Kelly said, you go to certain, movie theaters to see Paranormal Activity because you want to see your friend shit their pants, And this is more of a existential dread that you feel throughout the movie, and it just strings you along. And, just to put my 2 cents in, I agree with all of you. I think the pacing is wonderful, and I really think that it earns the endings that it gets. So.
Okay, Kevin, I got it. So, The Witch got a 90% Rotten Tomatoes.
Right,
from
the critics.
60% from the audience.
60,
okay, so you're saying that the audience score is much lower.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, and then Roger Ebert was also dead at this time. So what? But RogerEbert.com, they still have that website.
Let's just nitpick everything.
Please, I like
points. I like what you said
about it earning the ending that it gets, because I like that wording that you used. I think that that's very true. Because something I was thinking about while watching this movie as well is there's this little bit of a witch hunt that goes on in the middle of it, and I love the paranoia, and you can't have a witch story without paranoia. I like that the decision was to make it sequestered in one family instead of it being a witch hunt for a whole entire colony or village, because that relationship between the family members is so much more intimate and it's so much more small scale. And the amount of dread with every single thing that ends up happening is just
that's getting ahead of ourselves, but it's amazing because, when you think of, the regular witch stories, you think of, villagers accusing other villagers, but these are people that you live with, you grow up with, and they're blindly pointing blame at each other. And we'll get to it later, but yes, that is a very poignant point. The other big issue, this is one that I kind of have to agree with. We kind of already touched on it already, but the dialect and the accents made me thank God for closed captioning, because I could barely understand, especially William. When William was in his crying modes, I would not be able to understand him without closed captioning. Do you think that was a help or a hindrance for the overall story? I'm sure it helped with setting the tone of the movie for a movie watcher. It's almost like hearing a second language. Eric, was the dialect okay in your opinion, or did you, like me, bend to the power of technology?
I thought I didn't bend to the power of technology this time. I've watched this twice before. It might have just kind of come along more for me this time. But what I took away from him using Old English, one, it made it very authentic. It made it feel like you were in the time. But two, I feel like the imagery is so powerful in this film. The director of photography, the whole framing of this film was so powerful that you don't really even need as much of to understand as much of the dialogue to get what's going on. Like, I kind of understood what was going on at every point without even really understanding the dialogue the first time I saw this film. Robert Eggers, he just did such a great job of directing it to where you knew what was going on, even if you didn't exactly understand what they were saying at every point.
I'll piggyback off of that. This isn't the first time that I watched this movie either, and I haven't used closed captions either time. I definitely feel like I only grasped about 60 to 70% of the spoken words, but that goes to show the power of the actors, because I could grasp what was being conveyed and what the message was at the end of the scene. So, though, I mean, that feels weird to say. Like, I didn't necessarily hear every single word, but I understand what they mean. But you kind of do, and I know that I'm going to come back to this movie again and again, and I feel like I'm going to pick up more and more. And I like that that's kind of an aspect of it.
That's a very interesting perspective. Kevin, as the newbie, are you with me?
Or a couple things to say on this one. I'm with you initially in the sense that, yes, it was difficult to hear. I alluded to it earlier in one of my other comments. I felt like it was like a Shakespeare play. Once you kind of get into hearing it for the first 5, 10, 15 minutes, your brain starts picking up on things, or you're ignoring all of the these and kind of and theys and putting it into your brain as a part. But I do want to touch on, I think there's a really useful element of the closed captioning in this film that I'm going to use the next time around, and that is having it on during the things like Black Phillip. The song from the Twins, when they're talking about the Black Phillip. I want to hear the lyrics to all that song. I want to hear I want to see the exact phrasing of the demonic possessed screaming prayer of Caleb, or what the twins are saying in those moments where they're kind of getting, all possessed. I think that from what I've read, that's all very accurate to the times. Mm-hmm. Like, he took actual accounts of children being possessed during that time period and used those scripts in here. And I think that having those subtitles might make it a little bit more poignant on exactly what they're saying in those moments. I don't think I'd watch it with the whole thing with the subtitles on. It just takes me out of it. I'm not a big fan of subtitles in general. But I do think in this film that it adds a second layer of authenticity to it, especially in some of those crazier moments.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have to say, the first time I saw this movie was in theaters. This was basically my, from what I could basically say, my getting my cherry popped with A24. And there, like Kevin said, that Black Phillip song, there was that time where William is shirtless in the rain, like crying to God, and like literally it might as well be Arabic, because I cannot understand 2 words of it. And it left me wanting in those parts, but I do agree with Eric and Kelly as well that, A, there's more for you to find out on your next watch because you know when to pay attention, and B, the cinematography and, just the way that they set the scene, you always know how someone's at least feeling. So I guess they do a really, really, really good job at conveying emotion without words. You can just see it in the setting as a whole. So I do agree with all of you, but I am in that camp where it's like, I need subtitles, especially when I'm reviewing a movie, because if someone said something, I don't know if I would get it wrong or not. But yeah, great discussion. I really loved all your guys' input on that.
And shout out to Jaron Blaschke, I guess, is the guy that does all of Robert Eggers' cinematography for all of his films. This one, The Lighthouse, and The Northman.
Well, that guy deserves a raise no matter what.
Shout out.
Yeah, amazing work.
Jaron Blaschke, good job.
Okay, so throughout the movie, the idea of supernatural forces are thought to be at play. You look at Black Phillip, you look at the Witch's Coven. Thomason and Mercy and Jonas were all accused of witchcraft at some point in the film. Within the context of the movie, is the supernatural elements an actual threat, or do you lean towards that it's all coincidence and this extremely religious family simply use it as a pun intended scapegoat? So basically, I'm asking you guys, what do you think? Is this a psychological horror or a supernatural horror? Eric, we had kind of had a talk about this before we started the recording, so I want to get your input on it first.
I think Robert Eggers wanted to make this ambiguous for sure, and I guess at the time there was something called ergot poisoning going on, where it was a fungus that grew on rye wheat and corn, and it caused hallucinations, convulsions, psychosis. So you could actually blame ergot poisoning for everything that happened in this film if you wanted to. It would make it a lot more lame, I think, if you just blamed it all on that. And so I choose to believe that this was all witchcraft, sorcery, and the devil, because it just makes the film a lot more fun. And I think Robert Eggers wanted to make this more open-ended. And so, yeah, I'm going to believe that Black Phillip was Lucifer, and I'm going to believe that there was a witch in the woods, multiple witches in the woods, and that... this is all about sorcery and witchcraft.
All right, Kevin, is this more of a Shining for you or more of a Paranormal Activity?
On my initial reaction is I'm going to answer that it's more of a Shining than Paranormal Activity.
Ooh.
But what Eric said is so damn poignant, because the director really, really wants the viewer to make his own decision. By putting us in an overly authentic scenario, from the setting to the words to everything we're seeing, if that could actually have been what 1630 looked like, then those people living in that isolated forest could absolutely 100% believe what's happening to them was a witch. In their life, in their times, that wasn't supernatural. That was as real as... I don't know, it's a bad description, but in their brain, like, that was exactly what could have been happening at that time period. And so Robert Eggers is going to leave us to think about that. Is it a commentary on the family? As Kelly alluded to earlier, like, their interactions to each other are so critical to this film. They've been around each other their entire lives, and all of a sudden they're, like, accusing each other of murder and all of these crazy other things that happen. And so maybe that's what makes this movie so good. Within the first 10 minutes, we see a witch literally grinding up a baby. Like, yes, that's supernatural AF. But as the rest of the film kind of progresses, then you can kind of go, well, wait, what would you do in this circumstance if you were put in the fact that you were the last one to see the infant and the infant disappeared randomly? You were the last person with your brother in the woods, and all of a sudden he comes back, like, hypothermic and possessed by Satan. Like, these are all real-life situations in theory, and you kind of have to ask yourself, what would you do? Man, it's just a great question, and it's what brings us back and what makes this movie just so good.
All right, Kelly, can you follow that up?
The old commercial turned meme that she, like, holds up the taco and says, "Why not both?"
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it. I definitely lean more towards it's actually a supernatural story, and all of these things that we read today that these real people went through and fully believe that there was witchcraft going on. What if there actually just was? What if that stuff did happen? And we talk ourselves out of it, but maybe this is the real story, maybe. And then it made worse by the paranoia, because of course that would happen. So it is both. It's psychological and
I just had a brain moment.
Witches.
That's the fairy tale, right? That's the folk tale that we're talking about, is that this family could have been a family that someone talked about, and then they got excommunicated from the church and then never saw them again. And so you create a story about what happens. And that's why folk tales about witches exist in general, because you have situations like this to peripherate them to the rest of the world. Brilliant!
That is IQ.
Something else I wanted
Go ahead.
to add too. IQ what, though, before I go on?
IQ 9000. I was going to do another meme. It's over 9,000!
But part of it too, with, spoiler alert, when William dies, not even in the most, like, those deaths become less supernatural. What happens to Caleb, what happens to Sam, we even see that from just, like, our perspective. It's not even from the family's perspective. That's why I'm like, okay, there's literally a witch out there in the woods. Because I don't think that there's anybody who's making up that story in their mind that we're peering into. But then the way that the mother and father die is very much just like something that could happen. And the dad asking God to basically kill him, and then the ram runs into him, is just like, it's just beautiful. What great writing.
It's amazing.
Poetic.
The fact that we can all take it any way we want. And I do want to expound upon what Kevin said, because that was kind of my big haha reveal. I was doing a lot of research into the Shining aspect of it, in the fact that it was literally about Tomlinson going crazy, and whether or not it's from the fungus or not, that's debatable. But I came across the YouTube channel. I want to get this right because this wasn't my original idea, and I never want to like pass off my ideas as not my own. This was by Rant and Bollock's YouTube channel. Check them out, please. It's an amazing 20-minute video, and they basically say what Kevin says because it doesn't. It's happenstance that it takes 60 years before the Salem witch trials. So this is a story about a family that Puritans tell their children and stuff about, like, all this, the fall of the people that went away from Puritan belief because, they left because of religious differences. So it's really about a folk tale about witchcraft that really ignited the Salem witch trials. And I think that's such a profound statement that it's a Russian doll story. It's a story about a story, and I just think that blows my mind. So I think Kelly at the end is right. It's about both because it's supernatural, but it's based on, probably a family that they found where all the goats were dead, their house destroyed, all the family members either dead or gone, and they said it must have been Satan. Because the only times that we see satanic imagery is either off screen from the family or what happens in the family's heads. So I really think there's a validity in that, and I am going to take that as gospel. But yeah, literally any answer is the right answer, and that's what I love about this podcast is because we're all right at the end because the ambiguity is just so chef's kiss. Anyways,
you hear that, listeners? We're all right, and so
exactly.
are you.
Exactly, and whatever you subscribe to, listener, that is your gospel. So going back to the horror element of the film, to call it scary or disturbing, in my opinion, would be a bit of an exaggeration. But the score by Mark Corvin, it really makes this movie, it makes me feel tense the entire time. Was this film true in its goals to frighten all of you?
It's not frightening in a slasher sense or anything. But I think that the majority of people, we keep talking about that at 10 minutes you see a baby smashed. That's extremely unpalatable to most people. And we're all sickos for smiling about it every time we've been bringing it up. Though they're not I'm not in fear of my life or anything. They have a few jump scares in this movie, but they're done in a really unique and fresh kind of way. And it's very much enhanced by the score. I don't know where to place this movie as far as genre goes, because I feel like it's not quite a horror. But if you didn't call it a horror and somebody watched it and saw what they are going to see, not expecting it, that's not fair to them either. So at the end of the day, what do I want to say about this? It's not scary. It's dreadful and artful. That's probably where I would place it.
All right, Eric, you were gonna jump in first.
Yeah, I still consider this a horror. The third time watching this, I wasn't exactly scared by it, but there is definitely disturbing imagery in here. Like we were just saying, the witch mashing the baby, but also Caleb, the apple coming out of his mouth. You don't know what's coming out at that time, and then you see it's an apple, but you're like, what the fuck's going on there? The old witch biting / sucking the goat's udders. That's very very disturbing. So there's a lot of disturbing imagery in here, I feel. It can fall in the category of horror. I can say it's disturbing, but it's not exactly as scary as, say, Hereditary, where there's way more that goes on under the surface there. There's more jump scares. And this one, I don't think its intention was to scare you as much as it was to disturb you.
Kevin, my music man, the score specifically is what I wanted to get at this. I'm very glad you guys put your two cents into it. But Kevin, what about the score? Did it not put you on, the uneasy street the entire hour and a half runtime?
150%. So our writer-director basically showed his hand right off the bat. We get the most intense side of this score right off of the flipping bat. As this family is leaving our Commonwealth and going off into the woods, we just have a screeching score of string instruments. Very classic horror trope sounding. Something that is very meant only to put you on complete edge. I did find it interesting that he insisted on having kind of period piece musician or instruments in this. So anything you heard, you would hear likely in that time period, as far as some of the more unique string instruments that you would see out there. I think that we kind of touched on it earlier when we talked about that roller coaster aspect, or the fact that it goes from start to finish on one way. That's mostly because the score is so consistent throughout the entire film. While I was writing my notes for this, I put on the score behind me on Spotify and just kind of re-listened to it as I was going along. And it really does a great job of kind of putting you in that idea that anything can happen at any given point in time. This might be a bit of a stretch on another theme here, but while we're talking about it, I really like the idea of the forced anxiety. In every single aspect of this film from start to finish, you feel that in there. But I also thought about, what if you were a Puritan in that time period? And if you were a Puritan in that time period, you are living under religious anxiety, right? You believe that God is going to punish you for everything, that you were born into sin, that nothing that you can do in your life is going to be good enough for God, and all you can hope for is to pray hard enough to get into heaven. I think it's kind of a unique comparison to how you feel throughout this entire movie as well, that you're oppressed by something, whether it be this evil witch or maybe just kind of the way that the music makes you feel, but you certainly feel kind of a little bit claustrophobic, a little bit that you can't escape whatever you're trying to get away from. And that's very much because of the effort that our composer put in, and how the score really fit the movie in general.
I feel like you made a deal with Black Phillip because you are stealing all my thunder tonight, Kevin.
I'm so sorry. Sorry.
Yes, I would greatly akin the music, which, by the way, is not to beat a dead horse. We're talking about The Shining, but the score rivals The Shining. It rivals Jaws. It is something that, like I said, it makes me feel on edge the entire movie, and they're just having regular ass conversations. They're just about to shoot a rabbit. It's just mundane things, and the score heightens that to 100%, and then it pays off in the end brilliantly. But yes, I do think that the score is to reflect their guilty conscience. I believe that they all believe that they're horrible sinners. They're all worried about Samuel because he was unbaptized. And I feel like the score represents that every moment for them is, I cannot sin, otherwise if I die in my next heartbeat, I'm going to hell. So, Kevin, greatly put. Kelly?
Right, and in that, we know that's how they feel, and then we get that situational kind of thing where we know when they're lying to each other.
Exactly.
Even when it's something that's like as nice as Caleb saying, "We were looking for apples for you, Mom," or the dad withholding the fact that he sold this prized silver goblet. These are the kind of things where we're like, ooh, I knew that they just did a sin right there. Like, the devil has an opportunity to get them now. That's just like another like goosebump kind of moment for a viewer.
Yes, Kevin, before you burst.
We talk about the devil coming in and a moment that allows the devil to enter. Someone was commenting on the internet that the original sin of the family is the selling of the silver cup, and that everything that happens kind of after that kind of period is allowing Satan to kind of enter into that household. And I kind of was like, oh man, like what if he bought Black Phillip with the silver cup money? And then he brought in Satan himself with the first sin of the Puritans. I was just like, oh man, you could just keep going.
We know he buys his trapping gear with the silver cup, and I love that he is this man who's just like incompetent in what he needs to do to grow crops and to hunt, and he's not built for that. He got in trouble for preaching the word of Jesus in a way that they didn't agree with or something.
And you know what he's not incompetent at, Kelly, though? Is chopping wood.
Oh my gosh.
He's a pro lumberjack though. He's got that down.
He loves
that. Man slaps a good log. I will tell you what. I mean, if that actor isn't the world's best log chopper at this point in his life, I mean.
But do we need to talk about that aspect of our main character? The fact that he really doesn't bring anything, and that his pride of being the man, of being the guy. He talks about it constantly in interviews, Mr. Eggers, about how this reeks of The Shining. He talks about it smelling like The Shining, and he's concerned that it's going to be too much like The Shining, and he's very, very well aware of the comparisons, put it that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I love that we got in touch with the Puritan side of all this, because I think we can all agree that theology plays a big role in the film, and the characters each reflect major sins. Caleb represents lust, Catherine represents wrath and envy, William represents pride. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Jonas and Mercy represent sloth, and Samuel represents original sin. What do you think of the cast and the perspective they brought in Tomlinson's downfall? Do you think that the family itself was, I guess, in more or less of a term, the serpent tempting Eve to join evil? Kevin?
What is the serpent in this circumstance? I think that, honestly, the serpent in all of this is the natural want and desire of a young woman to become more than what she's allowed to be. We realize that our character in Anya Taylor-Joy, she's the main character from the very beginning. Okay, she is the focus of this because she's the first person that we see. So we know that that character, everything about this film is going to necessarily revolve around her interactions with the family, her interactions with the witch, I guess, and her interactions in general across the whole board. So we kind of have to focus what we're going to feel throughout this entire movie based on her performance and what she brings to all of it. So I think that if you focus on that aspect, you really kind of see what the rest of the film is going for.
Excellent. Kelly, do you think the family is a symbolism for the downfall of Tomlinson and the way that she eventually gives into the devil? Spoiler alert. Do you think, what do you think of the characters that are surrounded around her, I guess, is the main question.
I like that you pointed out our 7 deadly sins. I knew definitely the pride of the father, it was a problem and probably set them off in the wrong direction right from the beginning. The mom wanted to go back. She's like, we should have never even done this, but it's his pride that got them there. And then the mom is so wrathful and angry. She's never going to forgive her daughter for what happened to the baby. And so both the mother and the father have this like compounding problem that then affects and falls down into the whole family. On top of that, Tomlinson, our main character, literally in the movie becomes a woman, and that part is talked about as well. And I think that there's a reason that they bring it up too, because that is the start. She's growing up, she's finding her independence, she's ready. She's mouths off to her dad about what I just mentioned with his incompetence, and it's blamed that that's the devil speaking out of her. But what it really is she's not going to be a submissive wife. Like, that's not going to be the role that's defined to her. And she's being crafted based on the way that her parents are behaving as a result of their quote-unquote sin.
Just trains of thought, just tons of different things happening while we're having this discussion. It's just mind-blowing to me. Like you said, Kelly, they make a mention of it for a reason. They make it a focus in this because, let's think about real life back in the 1600s. If women were having there was no independence for women. If a woman had ever had a thought of being a leader, of speaking out, of having an opinion, of doing anything else, they would have been shut down by society immediately. But now you don't have society. Now it's just you in the woods. Now it's just you in whatever you're feeling because there's nothing else to tell you otherwise. And I think that's just such a brilliant, concept in general and kind of what that looks like and the exploration of her character and what it even looks like at the end. Like, we see her at the end. We'll talk about it then, but it's just brilliant. Just chef's kiss, just her performance in general.
I think a lot of what this movie has to say, too, is that shame can lead to violence and toxicity in general. And there's actually a quote from here. I have in secret played upon thy Sabbath and broken every one of thy commandments in thought, followed the desires of my own will, and not the Holy Spirit. I know I deserve all shame and misery in this life and everlasting hellfire, but I beg thee for the sake of thy son. So it's in old New England and in people that are very religious, there's a lot of shame that's involved, and shame can turn into violence. Shame can turn into toxicity because it's this thing building up inside of you where you are blaming yourself for something, and then you start lashing out at other people because of the shame you have in your own life. And I think that's a big thing to say about this film, and also just about old New England, old America in general, maybe even modern America too. But that's for another day. Yeah,
well said, Eric.
Parallels. Let's go.
Yeah.
It's so funny because, okay, so I definitely had the feminism as a note, and I think you guys all hit it beautifully, by the way.
We see it actually kind of interestingly in that opening scene with the trial or the meeting house. I mean, you probably noticed it. You had half of the women on one side and half of the men completely on the other. And then later in the movie, we also get the dinner scene where we have William preaching over the front like it's the Last Supper, and all the ladies are on one side and all the men are on the other. So it's just that, quite drive down the middle.
And Thomasin, this whole film, was about to get her period. The parents were talking about marrying her to somebody else right after she got her period. Back then, when you bled, you would get married off. Sorry for people that are... No, not sorry. Fuck you.
No, and
yeah, that's what I was alluding to. And I was like, should I just say period?
It's just about, not only that, but it's about the religious side of thing, too. Yeah. Like, the reason they did it is because they felt that separating the daughter away from the mother and the family was a way to bring her closer to God. And that was the most important part of your role as a female, was to be that religious aspect to your family. So she knew exactly what was coming. And
he was going to sell her off, essentially. It would have been like a classic barter thing where, hey, you marry my daughter, you give me some sheep, and we'll call it a day.
Yeah, we're
going
good.
To sell my bleeding daughter so that I can keep my family alive.
She can make you a whole bunch of kids, and we'll be fine.
This is for the good of the family.
Good of the family. Good of the people. Good of the heart.
You heard it here first. It's a coming-of-age story. Also...
It's not wrong.
Also...
In a New England sense, yeah.
Also...
None of you ever got a period. You would feel the same way if it happened to you.
So let's talk about... I'm going to call it ending part 1, because I really feel like there's an ending and there's an epilogue to this film. Thomasin and Caleb go out to the trap and... to collect a dead animal so they can feed. The devil intervenes, Caleb gets lost, and he comes back eventually, and he basically has terrible fits, and throws up an apple, like Eric said, and almost dies. That's when the family really starts butting heads, and everyone starts pointing fingers. What would you do in this situation if you're Thomasin, as everyone is blaming you of being a witch, and she points fingers at Mercy and Jonas? Kevin, what did you feel about the ending? The ending, not the epilogue.
So I thought that part of the movie was my most favorite. I enjoyed it the most in general, mostly because there was something that was different every time it came to that conclusion. I didn't really know where it was going to go. Honestly, throughout this entire film, I kind of thought it was going to end up with them going back to town and someone trying to light someone on fire, like most of the witches movies do. And I'm glad it didn't go that route. It was very interesting for me. I was totally caught off guard when Black Phillip ends up. I don't know why I keep calling Black Peter. I think is another character in mythology of some sort. Anyway, when he gores William completely out of nowhere, I really enjoyed that because it kind of caught me off guard, and everything that happened after that I didn't see coming. And I love that when a film gives me something I don't expect. From the mother, straight up attacking her daughter, to the lengths that she had to go to defend herself, to our hook-nosed witch showing up in the barn and eating the goat. It was just, the whole thing was just excellent. I really enjoyed the way they went with it. It surprised me at every turn, and I thought that it brought the supernatural aspect to real forefront, and it reminded me that I was watching a horror movie and that there was anxiety abound. So just good job.
Excellent. Eric, again, I think the ending can be defined pretty much anywhere between Caleb coming back and Thomasin falling asleep on the kitchen table. So what did you feel about the ending?
I mean, I think it can be Thomasin giving into temptation finally. She was a quote-unquote God-fearing woman this whole movie, and it's finally her, kind of giving into temptation, but really it's about her being free from the constraints of, this Puritan family, this extremely religious family, and it's about her letting go and, in a sense, being herself, and in the sense of the film, it's really about her. She finally comes into being a witch. There's something to be said about how she is growing up at this point, and her family was extremely restrictive of her, made her very God-fearing, and then her whole family dies, and she's just like, okay, I can either go back to this plantation over here, or Lucifer can, give me butter, let me live deliciously, let me see the world. I think I'll take that option.
Butter. I had no idea that was against Puritan belief, but Kelly, same question. Ending. Also, quick aside, Kevin, since you brought it up, what do you think? William just let Black Phillip gore him at the end. He had the chance to pick up the axe.
Do you want my actual answer? Because it's kind of a little bit elaborate.
Okay, I want to hear Kelly first, and then we'll go with that as a separate question.
Excellent.
Yeah, what I was alluding to with Black Phillip versus William prays in the rain. Like, he just gives up to God and is like, however you're going to get rid of me, just do it. Just let it happen. And then the next day, he gets gored. By the devil, maybe.
Question mark?
I think that there's some other scenes that I want to touch on in this
yeah, I know it's
area that we're grabbing real quick, but just like Caleb and his lust, and he gets what he deserves for trying to look at his sister's cleavage, and I love that the witch comes to him in the form of like big titty goth GF. I love that that's a whole thing. I love that he has bite marks on his face from her kissing him, that kind of touch. The whole like almost possession and then release of that whole scene.
And
I don't know that the twins...
He sees Jesus, apparently. Yeah.
Right. I mean, Jesus came.
But was that Satan?
Came and took care of him,
that Satan
supposedly.
being like, hey parents, your kid's gonna be fine. He'll be fine. Just hear me quote. Or is it actually Jesus?
I love that the twins weren't able to recite their prayers because they've been dancing around with Black Phillip throughout the whole movie.
I don't know if that's
that
true,
was a great
though.
piece.
I think. Go ahead. Sorry, I'm talking about.
And one more spot that I just want to call out that for me is the humor of the whole movie, and the part where I laughed the loudest is when Caleb goes missing and the whole family starts to walk towards the ominous woods, and you see the two twins are just tied up to the fence.
Yes,
to,
that was perfect.
Try to keep them safe for a moment.
They're just flailing.
That just killed me. I loved that moment.
I do think that that scene with Caleb, like I don't really know who the actor is, but I get Reagan from The Exorcist vibes about how his body's convulsing, he's screaming like these like tongues basically, and
Harvey Scrimshaw apparently is his.
Well, he was
name.
phenomenal.
Anyway.
I can't believe he didn't like keep going on it, unless he has.
Yeah, that was a really good job.
But that scene was so like powerful to me, and I do have to disagree with Kelly a little bit. Mercy and Jonas, I think they were still playing an act against Tomlinson at that point. I think they purposely did not remember the Lord's Prayer, and they were like bending over because a few scenes, a few scenes later, William, drags her out, and then she tears him an absolute new asshole, which was amazing. And then they come back in because she accuses them of talking to Black Phillip. Mm-hmm. And then he does this whole, like, godly speech, and he's like, I should bash their heads in right now. And that's when Jonas wakes up and starts screaming. So I do think they were putting on an act that they were talking to Black Phillip.
Does that mean, though, that how would they not be scared enough by what's happening to their brother that they would do everything in their power to try to help him?
Well, I think their mother is crazy enough where they're actually on her side. They know how much her mother has contempt for Tomlinson, and it's such an easy scapegoat, again, pun intended, for Tomlinson to take the blame. And they're all going through this terrible time right now, and they're all starving. And I think they're fighting so hard at each other that it bends against itself. And I think that Mercy and Jonas, that they're basically conjoined at the hip. So they will do anything to make sure that, their family goes back to the way it was. And what started that? That was Tomlinson losing Samuel.
Just one more thing we probably have to touch on. Caleb is going through puberty at the same time as Tomlinson. And Caleb is, looking at her boobs. And it leads to some very awkward sexual tension between brother and sister. It's an uneasy point of the movie. And I kind of like how he put that in there because I feel like if you're living in this old New England like family and there's no one else around you, you're going through puberty. I don't know. Yeah, like Caleb Is he excused of that? I don't know. Is he?
I think so. I think he is.
He got what he deserved.
I mean, it's clear that he knows what he's doing is wrong, and I think that's a very good point
it's clear.
in the film as well. And what Kelly mentioned is when the witch ends up seducing him, it's like legs out the door first. Like that's the way they're going with it, leading all the way. But what I kind of wanted to touch on earlier, if we're good kind of rolling back that way, is if we're looking at the end of the film and Black Phillip goring our main character. There's a couple references to an Old Testament book of the Bible, the book of Job, throughout this entire film. We get references, well, just as a small aside, basically Job was a pious, rich individual in the Old Testament, and Satan and God had a bet where Satan said, I bet you he wouldn't love you so much if you did some bad stuff to him. And God said, yeah, well, watch this. And then God does a whole bunch of bad stuff to Job. He ends up, cursing his whole family, killing all 10 of his children, doing all of the terrible things that happen in the world. And a certain quote from that book of the Bible basically comes along the lines of where Job's at the end of his rope and he is just ready to curse God. And he says something along the lines of, corruption, you are my father. And worm, you are my mother. So basically talking about death and pestilence being the acceptance of his life at this point. And so that last line that we have where William screams at the goat, corruption, you are my father, is a direct line from the Bible, and one that is very relevant to the rest of the film and kind of the theme that they were going for. So I just loved that connection. I thought it was really brilliant.
And Catherine mentions earlier as well that she doesn't want to become like Job's wife. And that's when she's basically given up. She loses her religion and has a fever dream because of it, because she let the devil in.
It just shows you that the Puritans, just the Old Testament was their everything. Like that was the entire reason that their offshoot of religion even existed at all. So they were pissed off at the Roman Catholic Church for all of their, ridiculous hedonistic ceremonies and things like that. They're like, no, go back to the Bible. And that's where this entire thing even comes from in general, from a historical reference.
The hallucination that Catherine has, and it ends up Crow eating her boobs.
Her tatas.
But
one boob,
yeah,
right?
just the one. I'm sorry. Yeah. But she
picked a nipple clean off, probably.
But
straight off there.
So again, going through this psychological versus supernatural, she wakes up and there is a blood stain on her breast. So what is that about?
I once had a dream a dog was biting me, and when I woke up, I was squeezing my own arm with all my might.
So you think it was self-inflicted?
Okay.
But you guys can't say that it's supernatural and then explain it away.
No, I'm just giving a side story. No, I definitely, because there's a reference that we hear, what we later find out is likely Satan's voice speaking to her through her dead sons and wanting to get her name written down in his book.
Yeah, he was going for her. He wanted her to be a witch too. That was brilliant.
At the start of the movie, the wife, she says, was Christ not led into the wilderness to be ill met by the devil? And I think back then, the wilderness and everything about it, well, there were Native Americans out there at that point, but also it was looked at as this devilish place, like a place of heathens. And I think this was her, she was succumbing to the wilderness that was defeating them at that point. As they said at the start of the movie, the husband was like, we will defeat this wilderness, basically.
It will not consume us, is what the quote is.
It will not consume us.
Yes, we will consume it.
And that crow biting at her nipple was the wilderness finally overtaking her.
That whole scene in general is just like, wow.
Yeah, I think
bizarre.
that this
so bizarre.
This movie has a lot to say about, society versus the wilderness too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think, the old phrase "it takes a village" really comes into play. Yeah. I think it's interesting that they talk about other traders. You briefly see the plantation that they were on at the beginning, but really, as soon as they get on their own, it is isolation the entire movie, and I think that is intentionally done. I think the isolation is the way that you guys are talking about, where the devil is actually there. It almost feels like the devil has cut them off from society, because they get to the point where they've had so many outs to go back to the plantation, just say, sorry, I'm sorry I preached the word wrong. Mm-hmm. And then the horse leaves, the dog leaves, they have no food. Mm-hmm. It keeps like piling up, and then they're finally like stuck again with their sins that they have brought upon themselves, and then they're bogged down until they turn against each other. So I think isolation.
In the end, it's the dad's pride for him, like not wanting to go back. It's what leads the whole family to death.
And I think he realizes at the end, right, when he's on his knees screaming in the rain, and he's like, I did all of this, just save my family. That's all I care about is just save my family.
But then he goes on to try to kill his daughter.
Right, yeah. What the hell?
Yeah.
Well, she did blow up the barn. I mean, what would you do, man? Shit.
I don't think she blew up the... she just kind of woke up, right?
Yeah, like, it was Satan. Yeah. Come on.
Just sure looked like she was responsible.
Yeah, the witch was literally sucking a goat's udder right in the middle of the night, and then the kids died, and the barn was just fucked at,
we don't
at that
see
point.
What happens to the twins.
Yeah, we don't really see
Well,
what happens.
You know what's funny, though? I don't know if it's foreshadowing or not, but when Mercy comes to poke fun at Thomason for killing their baby brother, she does come in flying on a broomstick, and apparently they must have flown off. So, that's just kind of an interesting little potential.
Well, the witch did land on the roof, right? As they were sitting in that barn, she came down from the sky. She landed on the roof. She mentioned it to her father right after that, and we definitely saw that in the baby mashing scene, right? She was lubing up that broomstick, so we know that's what she's going for.
I was telling Eric about how I'm so happy we had a proper, like, haggy witch cackle.
Yeah.
That wasn't just, like, silly. It was actually... it actually put a little bit of fear in me where I'm like, oh, I can understand why a witch is scary and not just funny now. I'm glad that we still got a good cackle.
This film is true to the time, but then also hits on all the witch tropes, which is what I love about it.
Yeah, he did such a great amount of research on all of the fairy tale sides of what makes witch stories just so iconic.
Well, yeah, he makes witches scary, which is very hard because they've been so neutered throughout the years to be a kid friendly. You think of Hocus Pocus.
This ain't Hocus Pocus, buddy.
So yeah, I think they did a really good job. I think it's time to get to the end. An ending that I don't believe in. By the way, I think when Thomason puts her head down on the table, she either starves to death or goes back to the plantation, or she becomes a woman of the woods. I don't know. But it's the ending 2, which I like to call the epilogue. And that is when she makes the proverbial deal with the devil. And I think this is interesting. Again, goes back to my whole Shining theory. It's because the rest of the movie is so dour, and the lighting and the tone is so dark, and then she takes this pact with the devil, and it's all of a sudden you see vibrant reds, you see vibrant pinks, vibrant purples, and you see this fantastical things. You see naked women floating in the air as they're chanting in these pagan rituals. And she eventually floats with them, and movie ends. So, Eric, I want to start with you. What did you feel about the last 5 minutes of this movie? Do you think it happened?
See, that's where, when we started this podcast, I said you could go in a fork in the road. You could believe that this was all, or got poisoning. It was all psychosis, hallucinations, or you could actually believe that there was supernatural things going on, and that there was actually a witch in the woods, that Black Phillip was actually the devil. And I don't think it matters if you believe either. Robert Eggers definitely wanted it to be ambiguous, and you can believe either or if you want. I'm going to choose to believe the witchy side of it because it's way more fun. And I'm going to choose to believe that Thomason went into the woods, got around all these other witches, and started floating to the moon. And I think that's what I'm going to believe, and I think that's what happened.
Kelly, what do you think of the end?
I think for me, it doesn't matter if it happened or not. I think what matters is that it was included. Because I haven't watched this since 2016. It was actually one of the first movies Eric and I watched together when we started dating. So now we've been happily married for years. So you can watch The Witch, and maybe it'll happen to you, listeners.
Watch this really fucked up movie.
My one absolutely sounds perfect.
Yeah.
But what I will say with this rewatch is that is the stickiest part of the movie for me. That everything that happens at that end is everything that I remembered about the whole movie. I remembered it being good, but the whole end, and I'm glad, Blaze, that you mentioned the difference in cinematography, where before it's very cold and like has this kind of like metallic texture to it, and then it turns into warm and velvety and like just like luxurious cinematography.
Like a cloud, yeah. It's like...
Yeah, like you could reach out and you could touch this and it would be soft. And it's just this night and day difference. And it's just for that very, very end piece. And the image of her flying into the sky and all the pleasure that it gives her, like, that's all of that part is what stuck with me the most visually and made the biggest impact. So it's an absolute necessity that it was included in this movie, whether you think that it happened or not. I guess if I had to choose, I would say I want it to happen because I want one quote-unquote good thing to happen after a whole entire movie of tragedy.
Kelly loves Satanism. Endorses it almost. Kevin, I want to hear your opinion.
After Tomlinson kills her mother, we get that scene where she rolls the corpse off of her, and we just get that bright red bloodshot on her. And then what kind of happens after that scene to me is all just brilliant. So, of course, we get the scene where she goes back into the barn after her nap and asks the goat to speak to her. Did you communicate with my siblings? And of course, as a viewer, I'm kind of like, all right, what's the goat gonna do? Say yes, talk back to you? And all of a sudden, I described it as a holy shit moment because that damn goat starts talking in the most velvety Satan voice ever. And I was just like, fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. Like, it was...
I'd give into that voice.
I wanted to embrace everything about that moment. I was really excited as a fan of the
bassy
movie.
Voice.
I was just like, damn straight, you better take his offer. Like, everybody else is dead. You just go ahead and you live your delicious life. And throughout that, like Kelly said, the pure joy of her face as she ascending, I thought that was brilliant. The choice of putting her in the classic crucified Christ pose was super interesting to me. Like, that's the last picture we get is her in the very obvious picture scene of what Jesus looks like when he's crucified. And I was just like, wow, okay, she's a straight up witch and just made a deal with the devil, and now that's the last scene that we get is a comparison to Jesus. I loved it. I loved every minute. It was memorable. It was something that really solidified this as a horror movie to me, as something that I should take as a memorable piece. And I do appreciate your description of this as an epilogue, though, Blaze, because I do think that it's a very interesting aspect that I didn't really think of. Like, oh yeah, because you could have ended it right there, right? When it goes to black after her nap, you absolutely could hit the credits, and when I was watching, I would have been like, cool, that's the end, live it up to your imagination. But then we almost get a happy ending. It's not necessarily a happy ending because there's a bunch of death and destruction behind it. But
that's what the movie does to you. Though. When Blaze was like, Kelly likes Satanism, I'm like, no, I don't. But in this movie, I'm happy that it happened for her.
Right, exactly. Because that's your main character, and you feel for her, and you want her to succeed, and you want her to be happy. And everyone else was just death and destruction, and she ended up coming out on top. So, loved the ending, thought it was brilliant, and very much a reason why this movie is memorable.
Absolutely. I think we can all agree, like, again, whether it happened or not, she does get her vindication at the end. And I just think, irony is so hard to find, but the fact that her family eventually turned her into becoming a witch is one of the most poetically ironic things of, cinema history. But yeah, I see it as the epilogue because I feel like it's more fantastical than anything that we'd seen in the movie previously. And that includes seeing a witch suck on some goat titties. Anyways, so as we're wrapping up here, does anyone want to add anything? I know, like I said, we kind of skipped through a lot of specific scenes. I did that on purpose because I think this film is more of a vibe, more of a theme than it is specific scenes.
Yeah. A couple trivia points, just for the sake, because we like to point out the weird things that kind of go on. Charlie the Goat is the GOAT actor in this particular film. Apparently, he was an absolute pain in the ass to work with. Like, very hard. It was not trained. He sent our main actor, what's his face, Ralph Ensign, to the ER 3 different times during the filming of this movie. Broke his ribs, like, was just generally a dick. So, shout out to Charlie the GOAT for actually personifying Satan during the filming of this movie. Also, I love the idea that it made $40 million on a budget of $4 million. I thought that was brilliant. Just like, a lot of these A24 movies we talk about, they just have a huge budget and they get zero money in their distribution. And it was cool to see that the American audiences kind of picked that up, and I thought that was cool. And the last trivia part is that Robert Eggers really wanted to film this in authentic New England, but because of tax breaks and not having a whole lot of money, and this being his first film, he had to settle for middle of bumfuck Ontario, Canada, to film this out in the middle of woods. And he said it was really difficult to do. They filmed it in 26 days, so that's a straight shoot out in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and it actually turned out to be a good like a bonding moment for all of the cast and everything. But I thought that was a cool trivia point there. Just a couple things that we didn't really know about the movie, and now we know.
26 days is incredible for this film. Like, that kind of blows my mind. But what I was going to say is, a lot of the times when we're discussing these movies, we spend a lot of time talking about the actors themselves and how good of a job we feel like they portrayed. We really haven't touched on that in this conversation, and I think that goes to show how immersive this movie is and how much of a great job every single person and child involved and animal, Charlie, shout out, they all did. They acted their hearts out, and they made all very believable characters, and they spoke a very difficult dialect completely convincingly, like it was their first language. So there's no notes that I would give any of these actors other than great job, I believed your characters.
Right. There's a reason that this launched Anya Taylor-Joy's career. Like, she did such an incredible job for being a no-name actress before this, and here we are seeing her all over the place.
Oh, absolutely. And just to touch on that, another fun fact, Eggers, the first actress tape that he saw was Anya Taylor-Joy's, and he dismissed it at first because he knew her as a model and she was just getting into acting. He's like, no, that was just a one take, the one in a million shot that she had a good take. So they made her come back because it was a good tape, and he's like, oh my god, she's like the real deal once she did like the in-person. So completely changed her career trajectory by a million miles. And okay, so it is time for our favorite part of the show, grades. Now, usually I don't like picking on the newbie, but Kevin, I think I want to hear your grade first, because I kind of know what Eric's is going to be, and I kind of know what Kelly's is going to be. I want to know what yours is first.
All right. I feel like I've done a pretty decent job of kind of revealing my opinion on this film throughout this review, kind of touching on some of the things that I really enjoyed about it. Very few little things that I didn't really enjoy, mostly about the pacing. But for me, this was an experience, and for a couple different reasons. When I joined this podcast, I knew jack shit about A24, I knew jack shit about movies, but one movie that came out in conversations amongst you all was The Witch. So knowing about this movie from day one of recording this podcast has kind of given it an air of anticipation for when I actually got to it. I really wanted to put myself in the right mindset, in the right place to watch this film. I dedicated a time and a place where I wasn't going to be interrupted, that I was going to be in a darkened space where I could really just embrace this movie. I'm not a fan of horror in general. In fact, I avoid it actively. So for me to sit down and really kind of embrace what I was going to see made this movie all the better. I didn't watch any trailers. I didn't read any descriptions. I truly went into this completely blind, and I'm coming out the other side a big fan. I'm not saying that I wouldn't have been otherwise. I do think that watching it, no matter where I would have seen it, probably would have resulted in a similar experience, but I really do think that the way I approach this movie makes me appreciate all the better. Getting into it from a technical standpoint, it is truly the coming out party for Robert Eggers. It's one of those where people watched The Lighthouse and realized that this movie existed and came back to it and gave him all more of kind of that clout and that power moving forward. I'm super excited to get to the rest of his films, and I think that watching this one gives me kind of more of a ready to go vibe when it comes to watching those other films. I'm an active Robert Eggers fanboy now, so congratulations on that. That's pretty much all you need to know about the rest of this film. The performances were fantastic. We alluded to them earlier. Everybody, top down, played a critical role in establishing this film and the immersiveness of it. We don't get into the vibe if we don't feel the story of every single family member, all of their concerns, all of their successes, all of the things that happen throughout the film to each of them. We all kind of feel it. The cinematography was brilliant, from the long-standing shots of the opening vibes with the tree, when they first come up to their little plantation, to the long shots of the nature in general, to some of the more spooky things. Yeah, there was some really disturbing imagery, but it never lasted long enough for it to be a turnoff. It never lasted long enough for me to go, man, I really don't want to watch this movie anymore. It was brief, and it was effective, and it allowed the plot to continue. And for that, I was really appreciative. I hate gore in general, but this movie did it in a very classy way that made something even as extreme as grinding up a baby within the 10 minutes palatable, and made it more interesting to see where the rest of the film was going to go. I really enjoyed what they were going for across the board, from a historical standpoint, from a visual standpoint, from a storyline standpoint. If I had to give it any criticism, because I feel like every movie probably has somewhere at all, it did slow down in some of the long dialogue spots in the middle between some of the actions, where it kind of had my mind wandering a little bit about what happened at the end. Minus that, though, this was an excellent movie from start to finish. It was something that I would recommend to my friends, to my movie lovers in general, something that I would tote this podcast on as, hey, listen to this episode because it's well worth our discussion. And for all those reasons, it's going to definitely get an A24 for me. It's something I can't wait to go watch again, and just want to keep diving into it for future episodes. So, great job. Looking forward for the rest of Robert Eggers, and this movie was awesome.
Amazing review. Eric, let's hear your
Yeah. So like I said, this was like the third time of me watching it, and this third time I've kind of realized that this kind of kicked off the elevated horror genre. So there's the horror genre where you have slasher films, you have kind of psychological horrors. You do have things back in the day like Silence of the Lambs that are horror but aren't exactly what we consider nowadays like elevated horror. And Get Out came out about 2 years from when this film came out. And The Witch, I feel like, kind of kicked off the elevated horror genre, which was a genre that has carried to this day, that people are now saying, like, okay, we have a horror film. What more can we say about it? How can we disturb people? How can we scare people into thinking, oh, wow, I've come away from this film disturbed, but also, like, it's changed me a bit. That's, I think, what Stephen King was trying to do, like, all these years. And I think he did with some of his books. If you've been reading them, he has been trying to do that. Either way, Robert Eggers, this was his first film, and it kicked off a tremendous career. And Anya Taylor-Joy, same thing, first film for her, kicked off a tremendous career. It's a low-budget film, and they did a ton with it. Like, same with Ex Machina, which we reviewed last season. Low-budget film, they did so much with it. And I have to respect it a lot for that. And, yes, I'll give it a full A24, not A plus 24, but A24, because ultimate A24 film, like, when you think of A24, you watch it, you come away with it wanting to read way more about it, wanting to analyze it scene by scene, dialogue by dialogue. And that's why I purely love this film. A24 for me.
Wonderful, man. Kelly, can you top these two great reviews? Or are you going to dog shit it like you did Spring Breakers? Let's find out.
Please don't put this movie and Spring Breakers in the same boat.
What are you doing?
What are you even
I'm just giving my friend shit. That's what I'm doing.
Woof! I'm just gonna keep mine short. I think that I already alluded to how I feel about this movie on a whole. I have already called it a work of art, and that's what it is. And like we've already talked about too, it just made such an impact on me the first time that I watched this movie. For me, this is what put A24 on the map, that made me go out of my way to start finding A24 movies, or after I saw a great movie, And then I would find out it was A24, and I went, well, of course, The Witch was A24. So, and I feel like that made such an impact. It put Robert Eggers on the map as one of my favorite writer-directors of all time now. Everything that he's made is just, it makes me live deliciously. It's such a work of art, everything that comes out here. What did we touch on? We touched on the cinematography, the score, the acting, the actual content as far as the story, as far as the, like we were said, attention to detail. And I feel so engaged and immersed by this movie. I care about what's happening to every character. It's everything that you could ever ask for. And it made witches scary again. That's not as easy as it might sound. That's a very difficult thing to do, and it was amazingly done. Yeah, there's nothing I can say other than great words about this movie. It made a huge impact on me as a movie watcher, movie goer. So, an easy A24 to hand out to this one.
All right. Well, just like Kelly, I'm going to keep this short and sweet as much as I can as well. I think Kevin and Eric really just said everything that I need to say about this. And just like Kelly, this is the first film by A24 where it was distinctively A24. We can talk about the score, the cinematography, like that was already like in place. Like that already made it good movies. And then we can bring in the layers, the allegories, what's it really about, you know, the themes, the overarching themes, the undercurrents of feminism. You know, like we can dissect these movies if we really wanted to. I purposely tried not to do that as the host, not to dissect every scene, because I really feel like we could take 2 hours of every scene and we could talk about strange fungus in corn that makes people psychotic, you know? Like, it's amazing, like, the theories and the fan theories that come out of this. And ambiguity is, like, it's very special to me in the terms of art in general. And as someone who loves film, I think the more ambiguity that the directors and writers let us have, the more that we can have these fun conversations. And that's why we do this podcast. We don't do this podcast for Barely Lethal. We do this podcast for Ex Machina. We do it for The Witch. We're going to do it for The Lighthouse, Hereditary, Everything Everywhere at Once, you know. So, again, this is one of the fine pillars of A24. I do have one issue with the accents, and I think we all can get past it because how badly Robert Eggers wanted us to be immersed into the film. So, unlike you cowards, I'm going to give this an A+24. It's actually going to be it's going to be an upside down double V, 2 A's.
Love it. Love it.
And yeah, this is one of the perfect films, and of course, everyone that I've ever met needs to watch this. We need to discuss this. And if you don't like it, we can't be friends anymore. Sorry, Mom. Peace. You know.
On that note, we seem to have tracked down Cole in the Mojave Desert, and he wants to give us his review of The Witch. Live deliciously, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cole William Whitlaw Gibson, co-host of A24 on the Rocks. Currently stuck out in the Mojave, unable to make the recording tonight, but I did want to give you my quick Witch rundown and review. This is a cinematic masterpiece, but just to touch on some of the high points, it's got naked old people, babies turned to peanut butter, Queen's Gambit girl, it's got Ralph doing his gruff, gritty, sexy old English voice, it's got a talking goat, and it's filmed in Ontario, Canada. What more could you ask for a film? This is an A24 to the max. I appreciate everyone. Love you. Good night.
But thank you guys, everyone. This is amazing. This is why we do this. For you. We do this to talk to you. I want everyone to 5-star rate us, like us, tell your friends about it. Please love us, like us. You know, this is gonna be a thing for me. I need to, retire off of this.
I just want to say thank you, movie watchers and listeners to the show, and thank you, movie makers, especially Eggers himself.
Hey, Robert Eggers, thank you. Appreciate you, guy.